Pick up a loaf of bread at your local grocery store, almost any loaf, and flip it over. Read the ingredients out loud. You'll probably get about 3 or 4 words in before you hit something you can't pronounce. Because what's in that bag is not really bread at all. Not by any definition that would have made sense to your grandmother, or frankly, to most of the world. It's an ultra-processed food product that happens to be shaped like a loaf. I did that with 12 of the most popular bread brands in America. I went through every ingredient list. I looked at the lab testing that exists on pesticide residues. I traced who actually owns these companies, and what I found was that most of what lines that bread aisle fails every meaningful standard for real bread. Here's the thing that got me started on this. In the United Kingdom, there is an organization called the Real Bread Campaign. They've been pushing since 2008 for bread that contains no additives, no dough conditioners, no preservatives, nothing artificial. Just flour, water, yeast, and salt. Basic stuff. And they point out that the majority of commercially sold bread in the English-speaking world quietly abandoned that standard somewhere around the middle of the 20th century. In Britain, the turning point was the Chorleywood bread process, developed in 1961, which used high-speed mechanical mixing, chemical additives, and lower-quality wheat to cut fermentation time from hours to minutes. That process, or variations of it, became the industrial template most of the world now follows, and most of us never noticed. I wanted to know, out of 12 major brands you can buy right now at a Kroger or a Walmart or a Publix, how many actually qualify? How many are made with real whole grain flour, no added sugar, no chemical preservatives, and no pesticide residues? The answer was 4, and a couple of those 4 have an asterisk on them. Let's go through all 12. We're going to start with the ones that failed hardest and work our way up to the ones that actually passed. Before we get into the brands, you need to know what I was measuring against, because real bread isn't a term the FDA regulates. I used 4 criteria. First, the primary ingredient has to be a real whole grain. Whole wheat flour, sprouted grain, something with the bran and germ still in it. Not enriched flour, not bleached flour. The Whole Grains Council, which is the main certification body for whole grain products in the U.S., defines a whole grain as containing all 3 parts of the kernel, the bran, germ, and endosperm. That's the baseline. Second, no added sugar of any kind. No cane sugar, no high fructose corn syrup, no honey, no molasses added in processing. Third, no dough conditioners. Things like azotocarbonamide, which is also used to make yoga mats, and which is banned as a food ingredient in the European Union, the UK, and Australia. Or DATEM, or mono, and diglycerides. Fourth, no preservatives, specifically calcium propionate, which is in a startling number of the loaves on this list. Those are the 4 gates. A brand has to pass all 4 to be real bread. Now, let's start at the bottom. Number 12, Wonder Bread Classic White. Wonder Bread is probably the most famous loaf in America. It launched in 1921 in Indianapolis. The name came from a balloon race. A Wonder Bread executive saw the international balloon race at the Indianapolis Speedway and said the sight filled him with wonder. That's a charming origin story. The ingredient list is less charming. The first ingredient in Wonder Classic White is unbleached enriched flour. That means the wheat has been milled down to just the starchy white endosperm. The bran is gone, the germ is gone, the fiber is gone, and then a handful of synthetic B vitamins and iron are added back in to replace a fraction of what was stripped out. The FDA actually mandates those add-backs under federal standards of identity, a policy that dates to 1941, when the federal government formalized bread enrichment requirements, specifically because the milling process had stripped so much nutrition from white flour that deficiency diseases were becoming a public health problem. The enrichment exists because the original milling process was so thorough that people were developing nutritional deficiencies from eating white bread. So they put some nutrients back, but they don't put the fiber back. They don't put the full nutrient profile back, and they certainly don't put it back in a form that resembles what was there originally. After the enriched flour, you get water, then sugar, then wheat gluten, soybean oil, salt, and then a long paragraph of dough conditioners, DATEM, sodium stearoyl lactylate, mono and diglycerides, calcium peroxide, calcium iodate, ascorbic acid, enzymes, and at the end, calcium propionate to retard spoilage. That is not bread. That is a bread-shaped, ultra-processed food product with about 15 ingredients bread doesn't need. By the NOVA classification system, the framework researchers at the University of São Paulo developed to categorize foods by degree of processing. This is a textbook Group 4 ultra-processed food. Wonder is owned by Flowers Foods, a publicly traded company based in Thomasville, Georgia, with about $5.3 billion in annual sales. In February of 2026, the Florida Department of Health released testing results on branded bread for glyphosate, the active ingredient in the herbicide Roundup. Wonder Classic White came in at 173 parts per billion. To be clear, that is far below the EPA's legal tolerance, which is 30,000 parts per billion for wheat. But glyphosate was classified as a probable human carcinogen by the World Health Organization's Cancer Research Arm, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, or IARC, in 2015, and California lists it as a known carcinogen under Proposition 65. The debate about what level is actually safe is ongoing. What isn't debated is that it was there. Wonder fails on every single criterion: enriched flour, added sugar, multiple dough conditioners, a preservative, and glyphosate residue detected. Last place. 11. Martin's Potato Bread. Martin's is interesting because it feels like a family brand, and it actually is one. Martin's famous pastry shop is still run by the Martin family out of Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. They advertise that their bread has no high fructose corn syrup and uses non-GMO sourced ingredients, and that's true. What they don't lead with is the rest of the ingredient list. The first ingredient is unbleached enriched wheat flour, refined, not whole grain, then non-fat milk, reconstituted potatoes from potato flour, yeast, and then you get to the sugars: regular sugar and cane sugar syrup, 2 separate added sugars in the same loaf. Then wheat gluten, sunflower oil, salt, butter, and the dough conditioners: sodium stearoyl lactylate, mono and diglycerides, DATEM, calcium sulfate, ascorbic acid, guar gum, enzymes, and then calcium propionate as a preservative. Older versions of the Martin's label, as recently documented on grocery delivery sites, also included azotic carbonamide and artificial yellow dyes. The current national label does not appear to include those, but what remains is still a loaf that fails on flour, sugar, dough conditioners, and preservatives. It's a genuinely popular regional bread, especially in the Mid-Atlantic. People love it for sandwiches, but it is not real bread by any stretch of the definition. 10. Sara Lee Classic White. Sara Lee Bread is owned by Bimbo Bakeries USA, which is itself a subsidiary of Grupo Bimbo, a Mexican company that the company itself describes as the largest bakery in the world. Grupo Bimbo has around 134,000 employees, operates roughly 196 bakery plants across dozens of countries, and generates revenue in the neighborhood of $17 billion annually. The Sara Lee Bread brand was acquired from Sara Lee Corporation in a deal announced in November 2010, valued at around $959 million, though the final price was cut to approximately $709 million after antitrust regulators required Bimbo to divest some brands in certain markets. That ownership matters because when you buy Sara Lee Bread, you're not buying from a neighborhood baker. You're buying from one of the most industrialized food production operations on Earth. The classic white ingredient list: enriched wheat flour, water, sugar, yeast, then a string of additives including datum, monoglycerides, soy lecithin, and 2 preservatives: calcium propionate and sorbic acid, refined flour, added sugar, dough conditioners, preservatives, fails all 4. The Florida glyphosate testing found 191 parts per billion in Sara Lee honey wheat, the highest reading of any loaf in that test. Their Artisano variety, interestingly, came back as non-detect, so the results varied by product line. 9. Pepperidge Farm, farmhouse, and 100% whole wheat. Pepperidge Farm has a wholesome story behind it. Margaret Rudkin started baking bread in her Connecticut farmhouse in 1937, originally to help her son who had asthma and allergies. She named the brand after the pepperidge trees on the property. Campbell's Soup Company bought Pepperidge Farm in 1961, and today the company is part of what is now called the Campbell's Company. The farmhouse whole grain white, despite the name, lists whole wheat flour first, then enriched wheat flour second. So it's a blend. The 100% whole wheat version does list whole wheat flour as the first and only flour. That's legitimately better than Wonder or Sara Lee, and it would qualify for the Whole Grains Council's standard on flour type. But then you get to the rest of the panel: sugar, calcium propionate, and sorbic acid as preservatives, DATEM, monoglycerides, sodium stearoyl lactylate. Pepperidge Farm's whole wheat line passes the flour test. It fails on added sugar, dough conditioners, and preservatives. On glyphosate, the Detox Project, an advocacy organization that funds certified lab testing, found 587 parts per billion in Pepperidge Farm 100% whole grain wheat in 2022 testing. That figure comes from advocacy-funded research and has not been peer-reviewed, so treat it as a data point, not a verdict. The Florida testing found Pepperidge Farm farmhouse Hardy White non-detect for glyphosate. 8. Canyon Bakehouse. Canyon Bakehouse is the wild card on this list because it isn't a wheat bread at all. It's certified gluten-free. It was acquired by Flowers Foods in 2018. Their 7-grain loaf uses brown rice flour, tapioca flour, whole grain sorghum, whole grain millet, and several other gluten-free grains. It's 100% whole grain within that universe, and it has no artificial preservatives. For people with celiac disease or serious gluten sensitivity, it is genuinely one of the cleaner options available. But it doesn't pass our definition of real bread for 2 reasons. First, it contains multiple added sugars: organic agave syrup, cane sugar, and molasses. Second, it uses xanthan gum, which is a thickener and binding agent that performs the structural role gluten would normally play in wheat bread. Xanthan gum is a fermentation byproduct and is generally regarded as safe, but it is a processing aid, and it belongs in the same family of ingredients as dough conditioners. If you need gluten-free bread, Canyon Bakehouse is probably one of your better options. If you don't need it, there are better choices. It lands at number 8. 7. Oro Wheat 100% whole wheat. Oro Wheat is the West Coast brand of Bimbo Bakeries. Same parent company as Sara Lee and Arnold, just a different label for different regional markets. And here's where things start to shift. In 2019, Bimbo Bakeries undertook what they called a clean label reformulation across their whole grain lines. Arnold on the East Coast, Oro Wheat on the West Coast, Brownberry in the Midwest. The result: no calcium propionate, no DATEM, no monoglycerides, no high fructose corn syrup, no artificial preservatives. They replaced the chemical preservatives with cultured wheat flour and vinegar, which are fermentation-based mold inhibitors that have been used in traditional baking for generations. So Oro Wheat's 100% whole wheat gets credit for meaningful improvement. Whole wheat flour is first. The additive list is materially cleaner than anything we've looked at so far, but it still adds sugar and honey, 2 separate sweeteners, and it contains natural flavors and soy lecithin. It's in the middle ground, a significant step up from Wonder or Sara Lee. Not real bread by our strict definition. 6. Arnold/Brownberry 12 grains and seeds. Same parent company as Oro Wheat, same 2019 reformulation, different brand name depending on where you live. Arnold covers most of the East Coast and Southeast. Brownberry is the Midwest label. The 12 grains and seeds loaf is actually impressive looking on the label. Whole wheat flour first, then a blend of 12 whole grains: rye, corn, oats, millet, triticale, brown rice, barley, buckwheat, kamat, teff, plus sunflower seeds and flax. No calcium propionate, no datum, no monoglycerides. Cultured wheat flour and vinegar for preservation. Non-GMO, project verified. The Arnold line is a genuinely better product than the conventional white loaves. It gives you whole grain flour, a real multi-grain profile, and no chemical dough conditioners or preservatives. Where it fails, it adds sugar and contains natural flavors and soy lecithin, not disqualifying in most people's minds, disqualifying under our strict definition. If you're buying conventional bread at a regular grocery store and you want the most responsible choice in that category, Arnold or Brownberry whole grain lines are legitimately among the better options available, but we haven't gotten to the brands that actually pass yet. 5. Nature's Own 100% whole wheat. Nature's Own is Flowers Foods' biggest brand. The company calls it, based on Circana retail data, the #1 selling bread brand in America by units, which means more Americans buy this loaf than any other. The reformulated whole wheat version, and this has gone through changes in recent years, now leads with whole wheat flour, uses no calcium propionate, no artificial preservatives, no HFCS, and is non-GMO project verified. Flours replace the preservative system with cultured wheat flour and vinegar, the same approach Bimbo took with Oro wheat and Arnold. There's a catch: it still adds brown sugar. And depending on which panel you look at, Flowers has multiple regional ingredient variations, and the formula has shifted. You may also find distilled monoglycerides or ascorbic acid listed as a dough conditioner. The Florida testing found Nature's Own butter bread, a different product in the line, at 190 parts per billion for glyphosate. Whether that result transfers to the whole wheat version is unknown. It's also worth noting the Florida methodology was criticized for lacking transparency, so treat that number carefully. Nature's Own whole wheat is better than Wonder, Sara Lee Martin's, and Pepperidge Farm. It's roughly comparable to Oro wheat and Arnold. Still not real bread because of the added sugar. 4. Dave's Killer Bread, 21 whole grains and seeds. Now we're getting somewhere. Dave's Killer Bread has a genuinely compelling story. Dave Dahl spent 15 years in prison before coming home to help his family's Oregon bakery and eventually developing what became one of the best-selling organic bread lines in the country. The company was built in part around the idea of second chance employment, hiring people with criminal records. Flowers Foods acquired it in September 2015 for approximately $275 million, which grew to around $281 million when certain tax benefits were factored in. Flowers now calls it the #1 organic bread brand in the country. The 21 whole grains and seeds loaf is legitimately excellent in several respects. The first ingredient is organic whole wheat flour. It's USDA certified organic and non-GMO project verified. The full ingredient list has no dough conditioners, no calcium propionate, no artificial preservatives. It uses organic cultured wheat flour and organic vinegar for preservation. The Florida glyphosate testing found just 10 to 12 parts per billion in the 2 Dave's Killer Bread varieties they tested, the lowest readings of any branded loaf in that test. Here's why Dave's lands at #4 instead of higher. It contains organic cane sugar and organic molasses, 2 added sweeteners. They're organic, which is meaningfully different from conventional sugar when it comes to pesticide exposure. But under our definition, added sugar is added sugar. If your definition of real bread allows for a small amount of organic sweetener, Dave's Killer Bread is genuinely one of the best products on a mainstream grocery shelf. It's in a different league from the conventional loaves, but it just misses the strict standard. The top 4, real bread. Now the 4 brands that pass, I want to say something before we get to these. 3 of them are not in the regular bread aisle at most grocery stores. They're in the natural foods section, sometimes in the freezer case. They are more expensive. That's a real barrier, and it's worth naming. Not everyone has access to Whole Foods or a natural grocery store. Not everyone's budget stretches to $6 or $7 a loaf. Those are legitimate constraints, but the question this investigation started with was whether real bread exists at all in U.S. supermarkets, and the answer is yes, it does, if you know where to look. 4. Tide. Silver Hills Sprouted Bakery. Silver Hills has been baking sprouted grain bread in Abbotsford, British Columbia since 1989. They're still family-owned. The concept behind sprouted bread is that instead of milling grain into flour, you soak the whole grain until it begins to germinate. It sprouts, and then you use that living grain as your base. Sprouting triggers enzymatic activity inside the grain. Enzymes begin breaking down starches into simpler sugars, and phytase, a naturally occurring enzyme, begins neutralizing phytic acid. Phytic acid is a compound found in the outer bran layer that binds to minerals like zinc, iron, and magnesium and blocks their absorption. Reducing it means you actually absorb more of the nutrition that's there. The result is a bread that's nutritionally different from flour-based bread, not just semantically. Their Big 16 loaf, which refers to 16 different grains and seeds, leads with organic sprouted whole wheat. It's non-GMO project verified, and the company states it tests for glyphosate residues. The ingredient list is short and readable. No calcium propionate, no DATEM, no monoglycerides. Cultured wheat flour for preservation, no artificial anything. Why is it at number 4 instead of higher? One ingredient, organic cane sugar. It's a small amount, and it's organic, but it's there. Some Silver Hills varieties also use organic oat syrup. If your definition allows for trace organic sweeteners, Silver Hills is exceptional. Under the strict no sugar standard, it just misses. 3. Alvarado Street Bakery. Alvarado Street Bakery is a worker-owned cooperative in Petaluma, California. Every employee is an owner. They've been making sprouted grain bread since the 1970s. That ownership structure matters. Decisions about ingredients aren't being made by a board trying to optimize margins on a publicly traded stock. Their sprouted wheat loaf is one of the cleanest labels you'll find on a commercially produced bread in this country. The full ingredient list: sprouted organic whole wheat berries, filtered water, wheat gluten, organic dates, cultured wheat flour, sea salt, organic raisins, fresh yeast, sunflower lecithin. That's it. The sweetness comes entirely from dates and raisins, whole fruit, not refined sugar. There's no calcium propionate, no datum, no monoglycerides, USDA organic, non-GMO. Now, is sunflower lecithin a processing aid? Technically, yes, it's an emulsifier. The Real Bread campaign in the UK would flag it, but it's a far cry from synthetic dough conditioners, and it comes from a natural source. For most people applying a practical Real Bread standard, Alvarado Street passes comfortably. They also make a no-salt, no-sugar, multi-grain variety. No added sweetener of any kind, not even fruit, which is about as stripped down as commercially produced bread gets in America. That loaf is as close to the 4-ingredient traditional standard as anything on a supermarket shelf. 2. Dave's Killer Bread if you buy organic and skip the sugar varieties. I want to add a footnote here. Dave's Killer Bread does make some varieties with no added sugar beyond what naturally occurs in the grain. Their Power Seed variety and some of their thins have shorter, cleaner panels. If you're a Dave's buyer and you're reading labels carefully, it's worth looking at the specific variety rather than treating the whole brand the same. The organic certification and low pesticide results matter. The sugar is the one thing to watch. 1. Food for life. Ezekiel 4:9, sprouted grain. This is the one. If you want a commercially produced bread that passes every single test, whole grain, no added refined sugar, no dough conditioners, no preservatives, and documented non-glyphosate certification, there is one clear answer, and it's been sitting in the freezer section of natural food stores for decades. Food for Life Baking Company is based in Corona, California, and is still independently owned, run by the Torres family. The Ezekiel 4:9 loaf is named after a verse in the Bible that lists 6 specific grains and legumes: wheat, barley, millet, lentils, soybeans, and spelt. And the bread uses all 6 in sprouted form. It is flourless in the traditional sense. There is no milled flour in this bread at all. The grains are sprouted and used whole. The full ingredient list: organic sprouted wheat, filtered water, organic sprouted barley, organic sprouted millet, organic malted barley, organic sprouted lentils, organic sprouted soybeans, organic sprouted spelt, organic wheat gluten, fresh yeast, sea salt. No added sugar. The sweetness, such as it is, comes from malted barley, sprouted barley. which the company explicitly argues is not a refined sugar. No dough conditioners of any kind. No preservatives of any kind, which is why it's sold frozen. You thaw it, and it has a fridge life of a couple of weeks. The company carries what it calls a non-glyphosate certified designation, a third-party verification that residues are not detectable. Is it the softest, squishiest bread you've ever eaten? Absolutely not. It's dense. It's chewy. It's more like what bread used to be before industrial baking decided that softness and shelf life were the two things that mattered most. Toast it, and it's genuinely good. Use it for a sandwich with something flavorful, and you won't miss the Wonder Bread. This is the standard. Everything else on this list is measured against this loaf. Here's the thing that stuck with me after going through all 12 of these. Of the 8 brands that failed, 6 of them are owned by just 2 companies. Flowers Foods owns Wonder, Nature's Own, Dave's Killer Bread, and Canyon Bakehouse. Bimbo Bakeries owns Sara Lee, Arnold Brownberry, and Ora Wheat. What looks like a wall of choice in that bread aisle is, in most stores, 4 or 5 corporations. And the 4 brands that pass, or come closest, are all independent or cooperative operations. Food for Life, Alvarado Street, Silver Hills, and Martin's, which at least has the family-owned distinction even if it doesn't pass our ingredient test. The correlation isn't a coincidence. When a company's primary obligation is to quarterly earnings, the pressure to extend shelf life, reduce ingredient cost, and maximize softness through chemistry is relentless. When a company's obligation is to the people who own and work there, those pressures are different. And here's a useful international comparison. France has had a law since 1993, the Décret Pain, that defines what can legally be called pain maison, or homemade bread. It must be kneaded, shaped, and baked on the same premises. Germany's bread culture is similarly regulated, with over 3,200 officially registered bread varieties recognized by the German Institute for Bread. Both countries have legal frameworks that separate real bread from bread-adjacent products in ways the U.S. simply doesn't. The FDA permits every single one of the additives we've talked about today. Calcium propionate, approved. DATEM, approved. Azotocarbonamide, still on the approved list, though the FDA announced in 2026 it would review that. Glyphosate residues up to 30,000 parts per billion in wheat. Legal. The existence of a legal standard doesn't answer the question of what you want to put in your body. Those are 2 different conversations. If you walk away from this video and change one thing, just one, here it is. Flip the bread over and read the first ingredient. If it says enriched anything, put it back. That one step alone will eliminate most of the bottom half of this list. I want to ask you something. When you were growing up, think back to the bread your grandmother baked or your grandfather brought home from the bakery. How many ingredients did it have? My guess is most of us have a very different answer to that question than what we'd find if we read a standard grocery store bread label today. That bread your grandmother made didn't have a panel, it had a recipe. And I'm curious, did any of the brands on this list surprise you, either because they were better than you thought or worse? Let me know in the comments. And if this kind of ingredient investigation is useful to you, subscribe. We do this for other food categories too. And the bread aisle is just the beginning.